It's been a turbulent year for Canada's manufacturing sectors. High tariffs put in place by U.S. President Donald Trump, a leading contributor to the loss in jobs and high prices. Joining me now to discuss the impact and where we go from here is Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. Thanks so much for being with us in studio today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start. And this is a timely conversation because you are heading down to the United States, to Washington. You're going to have a critical hearing underway. This is ahead of the CUSMA reviews, of course. We're going to touch on that. But first, it's been a while since we talked, and I thought I'd get a check-in with you about what the state in the auto sector is when it comes to jobs particularly.
Well, we saw over the last few weeks tough decisions by Stellantis and General Motors to idle plants in Brampton and in Ingersoll. Typically, those plants employ 3,000 people and then about 10,000 people in the supply chain. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars in suppliers' capital that's tied up in that, saying, hey, if you make cars, then we'll make the wheels and the doors and everything else. Those two are shut down, and then exports in the business are down 25 to 30%. So it's not good. And then yesterday we saw that terrible news out of Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, which is 1,000 jobs of 3,000 disappear. So down through the supply chain, right down to the raw materials, it's anxious times.
And you're going to be taking this message down to Washington with you later this week. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives, they're hosting public hearings throughout this week here ahead of the crucial CUSMA reviews. You'll be appearing in Washington. Some heavy hitters in a wide variety of sectors are going to be there. What's your message?
In automotive, there's a lot of talk out of the White House that says, oh, well, we want those jobs back in the U.S. Well, they've been here for 120 years. They say that those Ontario jobs are Michigan jobs, and the U.S. auto sector's decreased in production and it's gone to Canada. Well, my message is, actually, we've decreased more than you, but we work very well together. About 50% of a vehicle made in Canada is American auto parts. That's up from 38% when we signed the new CUSMA. So the CUSMA is working. And for all of those other jurisdictions that send cars in that they've tariffed, Japan, Korea, EU, those are cars that Americans like, but they have no American content on them. So continue to work together with Canada. We're the biggest customer for auto parts, but also Canadian customers by 100 billion cars a year, and the biggest $100 billion worth of cars a year, and the biggest source is U.S. So my message to them is, if the deeper you go into the data, the more integrated we are to their benefit. And we align with them on China. We're keeping Chinese cars out or tariffed. We're avoiding them coming into the market like they did in Mexico and Europe. And so, punishing us is punishing you.
You're touching on some critical messages here. I know why the auto industry, the sector, is a high priority area for Donald Trump. And we've heard him say before that he wants all auto parts to be made in the U.S. here. So I'm wondering, as you go down to the U.S., so many of your counterparts will be there as well, trying to convince the country. But how do you convince the most powerful leader in this world to maintain its ties with Canada when it comes to the auto sector?
Well, in auto, what we've learned to do over the last year, and then also in Trump 1.0, is to parse what he says from what he does. And so we've got tariffs on cars in Canada that he's been threatening the industry directly, but we managed to negotiate as an industry, not government to government, but as an industry, to get an exemption for Canadian auto parts into the U.S. So if parts are made in Canada and they're sent directly to U.S. assembly, there's no tariff. And about a month and a half ago, very quietly in an update, when they put tariffs on buses and trucks, they did an update and said, oh, that auto part exemption that was for 2 years, we've extended to 5 years. He knows that if he tariffs Canadian auto parts and Mexican auto parts, he'll shut down the U.S. auto sector. So we already see the difference in what he says and what they did, and it's to our mutual benefit. We didn't take a victory lap over that. Now we're going back there to say, hey, by the way, the American auto sector, General Motors, Chrysler, Dodge, Ford, that make cars here, they spend billions here, and the profits go back to Detroit. Having a healthy auto sector here and having healthy access to all those parts that make those cars in Detroit are important. There'll be no there'll be no name calling, there'll be no drama. I'm not there to argue. I'm there to present something that they don't seek themselves, which is math. And we're using their data and presenting it back to them. Say, look, the data that you collected, so you don't have to worry about me being the source, says $26 billion worth of U.S. auto parts were brought into Canada last year to be put in cars. So if you're worried that Americans are buying cars made in Canada, they're buying your auto parts. And they're buying your steel and your resin. And let's keep doing it together. We've slowly made progress in the dark. We're just coming out a little bit because out of the 150 witnesses that they chose to platform, we're the only Canadian industrial sector group there. And so we're going to do that in a way in which Canadians are proud.
Okay, you certainly have a voice at that table there. We'll be watching closely. Flavio Volpe, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.